So in this tutorial, I'm gonna talk about a more detailed topology along with the previous one. So in the previous tutorials, in the previous two tutorials, I showed how you can actually build this type of topology. Now what I want to do is that I want to show you the usage of these type of cables. All right, so serial DCE and serial DTE. So what we saw till now is that what we have seen till now is that we can use straight through cable to connect different devices. Sometimes we may need to use copper crossover cable, but whatever be the cable is straight through or crossover, we need to connect them to first Ethernet ports. Since these are Ethernet cables, so we need to connect them to first Ethernet ports. All right, so and now we're going to be seeing some different types of cables like serial DCE or serial DT. In short, these are called serial cables. Alright, serial cables. So to demonstrate this one, I will take another router here. So I'm going to take another generic router, not the empty version. I'm going to take the generic router PT version. Alright, so I'm just going to click on that and place it over there. So here is another router. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect a switch and a PC to this router too, just to make it similar to this topology over here. So I'm gonna be using 2960 switch, and this time maybe I want a laptop since there is a desktop. So let's just choose a laptop over there. So there's a laptop, and now it's time for connection. Right? So similarly, if I want to connect the laptop, this is an end device, right? So if I want to connect a laptop to a switch, I'll be using copper straight through cable. So from first Ethernet to first Ethernet, and then again from this switch to router, I'll be using a first Ethernet to a first Ethernet. So at this point, what I want to show you is that even after creating the connections, you can still move those components. All right, so this is actually very handy. You can always move those components. Sometimes the name gets hidden under the labels like this one, so in that case you can just move the component. All right, you can just move the component over anywhere so that you can see the names in a much clearer way. All right, so you can always move those components, you can always set them up. You can even select 3 of them all together and then move them all together. All right, so yeah, these are the options. You need to figure it out by yourselves because these are really easy, and I hope you should be able to figure it out all by yourself. So these are some handy options there. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to connect this router to this router. All right, clearly currently there are two different topologies here. One is here and the other is here. So I want to connect them. I want to create a new connection between this router and this router, so that this whole thing becomes one single topology. Okay, this whole thing becomes one single topology. Currently these are two separate topology. This is a topology and this is a topology. So I want to connect them together so that it becomes a single topology. All right, so by now, if you still don't know what a topology is, basically a topology is how a network looks like. All right, so if you want to know more about it, please Google it or search over other sites, so you can find a lot of information regarding topology, and you should be able to know it too by reading your textbook. Okay, Data Communications by Forozen. All right, so we want to connect this router to this router, so to that router. Okay, so we're going to be using a different type of cable to connect this router to that router. So this time we're not going to be using a straight through cable. So now you may ask a question that we can use a crossover cable, right? Because previously we saw in our connection picture that if we want to connect a router to another router, then we're going to be using crossover cable, right? Yeah, definitely we can use a crossover cable to set up this connection, but in our course, most of the tutorials, most of the contents are organized in such a way where we did not use a crossover cable to connect one router to another. We connected one router with the other with a different type of cable to show you, just to demonstrate you, that we don't always need to connect a router to another router using a crossover cable. We can use different types of cable too. Alright, so let me just show you. So I'm going to be using a serial DCE cable this time. Okay, there are two serial cables. These are marked red in the connections tab. So I'm going to be using serial DCE. These are very similar cables actually. So serial DCE means data, serial is serial, and DCE means data carrier equipment, and serial DTE, here DTE means data terminal equipment. All right, so I'm going to be using serial DCE. So you can see the main difference between these two icons is that there's a clock-like icon, a clock-like small image attached to this icon here. Okay, and in the serial DTE there is no clock-like picture. Okay, so I'm going to be using serial DCE, and I will tell you within a few moments what its significance is. So at first, let's just connect it. So I'm going to take a serial cable, and then I want to connect it to a router. So I'm going to click on that router, and you should be able to guess now where I should connect it. Since okay, so let's just move a few lectures back. So when I connected an Ethernet cable, I used first Ethernet port, right? So now I want to connect a serial cable. So where should I connect it? I hope you guessed it already. So I want to connect it on a serial port. Okay, I want to connect it to a serial port. So there are two serial ports, serial 2/0 and 3/0. So I can connect it to any of the port. Both of these are empty. If they are not empty, then they would not have been here. Alright, so since they're empty, so that's why they're being shown here. So I can choose any of those. So let's just choose the first one to keep a sequence. So I'm gonna be using serial 2/0, and you can see that the cable looks a bit different than the crossover or straight through cable. So this is a cable, lightning bolt like cable. All right, so I want to connect it to this router. So I want to click on that, and then I want to connect it to serial 2/0 or serial 3/0. I can connect it to any of those, but just to keep a synchronization, I'm gonna connect it to serial 2/0. But yeah, you can definitely connect it to any serial port, any empty serial port. Okay, so I'm going to connect it to serial 2/0, and that's it. The connection is done. But again, you can see that these ports, both of these ports, this serial 2/0 and this serial 2/0, both of these ports are red actually, because if we want to see green connection here, then we need to set up our routers. All right, but we have not learned yet how we can do so. So maybe in future lectures we'll be able to do it by configuring our routers. But since this is just the introduction part of this course, so I'm not gonna be going into details about that. Okay, so here I can see that this serial DCE cable has two different ends. At one end I can see that there is a clock sign, alright, and the other end there is no clock sign. So usually serial DCA cables, usually in serial DCA cables, this clock sign indicates the clock rate. The clock rate actually means how fast your data can travel from one end to another end. Alright, so if the clock rate is like 64,000 bits per second, maybe 64,000 bits per second, then it means that your device can send 64,000 bits per second to the other device. Alright, so this clock sign indicates the clock rate of my connection. Okay, so when I took the serial DCE cable, then if you remembered, or if you can't remember, just rewind the video. So when I clicked on this router, then this clock sign appeared here, and then I connected the other end and there is no clock sign. So this is the fundamental characteristic of this serial DCE cable. And if I want to take a DTE cable, so let me just show you here. So let me just delete that, and I want to take a serial DTE cable. Then if I click on that router, I connect it to serial 20, and then I connect it to serial 2/0 here. Now you can see that at this end there is no clock sign, but at this end there is a clock sign. So basically serial DTE cable is just the reverse of serial DCE cables. Basically I would say both of these cables are actually the same cable. Both of these are actually serial cable. This clock rate is just defining what a serial just the fundamental difference of a serial DCE and a serial DTA cable. Whenever I take a serial DCE cable, then the left side the left side of that cable is actually the clock, the side with a clock image. All right, and whenever I take a serial DTE cable, then the right side of that cable is the side with the clock image. So both of them are serial cables, but just for our convenience, this software has introduced that serial cable in two parts, like one is serial DCE, one is serial DTE. In serial DCE the clock remains at the left side, and in serial DTE the clock remains at the right side. Okay, so this is this has just been done so that users can create the topology more easily and more comfortably. All right, but both of them are serial cables. But yeah, most of the cases in our course we're not going to be using serial DTA cables. These are basically same cables, so we're going to be using serial DCE cables. So I'm just gonna connect it over here, and yeah, that's the final part here. All right, so this is the basic structure regarding how you can connect one router to another router. So you can connect it using a crossover cable, but we did not show that to you here. We did not show it to you here. We actually connected one router to another router using a serial DCE cable. And whenever there's a clock sign, then when we want to configure the router, we will also need to set up a clock rate, which will indicate how fast our data will move from one end to another end. So yeah, that's the basic structure. That's the basic tutorial about how you can actually configure a big topology. Here you can see that from our previous tutorials you can see that at first there was only one topology. There was only this sites connection here, and then we created this other part, and finally in this tutorial we connected both of them together. So this is how you can actually take your components to this interface and then connect them using different types of wires and etc. So in future tutorials we'll be learning more about how you can set the routers or switches and etc., and how you can provide IP addresses to a computer or to a router, and we will also see how you can actually deliver a message from one user to another. So that's it for this tutorial. Thank you very much.